Right, I'm going to rush through this. We've got the links. You all know that. Sponsor MicroPython. Damien can use your money.
Practice checks.
Good things.
Well, that's the branding.
We already know what's being talked about here. The only thing I had here is there's a note about one of the things I do before putting these slides together is go through Twitter, and I basically just do a search for MicroPython and kind of just go backwards through the latest posts. And it's been super interesting seeing how the Raspberry Pi Pico has changed things, because it takes me a lot longer now, probably in the order of 3 or 4 times longer. So there's a lot of activity around that micro. I just thought that was an interesting point to share, because I couldn't actually I spent a few hours going through Twitter, and I still didn't get back all the way till the last time we had our talk. So there's a lot of stuff going on. It's generated a lot of interest. And it's most of that interest is around the Pico, but it's also interesting seeing the ripple on to other platforms as well. So just because people start with the Pico and then try other things as well. Season of docs. So we talked about this last month where Joanna's submitted her stuff. That's all integrated now, which is great. We've got some good developer documentation. I mentioned that 2021's applications were open. We got down to the very last day, and Jim and I was tidying up last year's proposal, expecting to submit it that day with a few refinements and updates. Then when I went back to submit it, I realised that they'd completely changed the template. So previously we'd had, you would put forward a bunch of ideas, and then if that was accepted, you would have technical writers come right back to you saying, oh, we want to pick out that idea there, and we want to do that. This year it's different. We've got to choose one idea, or one suggestion, one documentation improvement, and we've got to put a bit more information around that. So we had to talk about ways we could measure whether the thing that was implemented was successful, and we had to talk about a budget, if there was going to be a budget. So we only realised this at, well, I realised it at about 10:30 at night of the night that it was due, and it was due at 5 a.m. And thankfully Jim helped out, and so we were going till about 2:30 in the morning. Finally got something submitted, and that is around updating our port documentation. So in particular about the RP2 port, NRF port. A lot of these things have been lagging behind the implementation. So no idea if we're going to get this resource allocated to us, but if so, that's the project idea we chose, and it could make a huge difference to the documentation if we had those things in place. I've published the proposal there too, so you can go read that if you so desire. My new hardware, and I'm kicking myself because it's really flashy, but I left it at home. It's one of these beauty light rings that I talked about last month. They've got, I think it's something like 40 RGB LEDs inside this thing, and you can control it with a remote control. And people have figured out how to hack this online. Really, they're quite bright and vivid. They're really useful sort of things, actually. And for $30, you can't go too wrong. So I'll bring it next month. That's the only new hardware I've got recently. In terms of the porting effort, I know Peter's still working on SAMD. File systems in place now, I think, yeah. All looking good.
For that one, for the M0.
For the SAMD 21, yeah. I do have more SAMD chips, so if anyone wants to help out, they're there for it. Tonight, I think we're going to brief, if we get time, we'll talk about the how to get more of the microchip peripherals integrated, so that we can access more of the SAMD peripherals. I've got a couple of different options there, and there's some pros and cons to them. Real Sparky, I've really got to chase up this guy's name. He's reached out to me to try to test the G474 build. It's sort of the newest, or one of the new ranges of STM parts. He's been working on it quite a bit, so I'll do that. I know that Sion and Damien have been spending a bit of time on the ESP32 S2 build. Sion hasn't. I think it's in Damien's court to merge or review a merge. Is that?
Oh yeah, I've got it.
Yeah, do his merge first, and then I'll do mine.
Ah,
Yeah.
right. Okay, cool.
Yep.
So there's that coming along. I've just mentioned this from last month as well. The wiki and the forums. We're still. I don't think much has happened here, but I've started doing a little bit more on the porting documentation, which is really the potential ports that we could target in MicroPython. Just a reminder, we've got to do this. So some news. We've got Element 14 have got this board and stepper motor thing. It's a Triang device, and they're looking to give away some of these things. If you're prepared to do a review, they run MicroPython, which was a bit of a surprise. Seeing it as an integrated product from Element 14. Don't know where that came from, but it's good to see.
Wow.
So if you guys want to put your hands up and have a play, that's available. There was a crowd supply project for the ESP32 M1, which is kind of cool. They're looking at extending the Wi-Fi range for the ESP32, looking at getting about a bit over 1 kilometre out of it, with some careful power amplification and noise filtering in particular. They've also got like an antenna board. You can use regular dipole antennas and whatnot, or you can use a specially designed sort of flat pack antenna they've got. Looks pretty interesting if you want long range Wi-Fi. Another crowd supply project for the Egoponics Mini, which is designed around getting agricultural technology. They threw together a lot of buzzwords like agri-tech and ag-tech IoT devices. So they've got some sensors you can put into the soil, so you can measure your soil, you can trigger watering, all that kind of stuff. But it looked quite interesting. Looked like it was well designed. The base board is $60 plus shipping, and you can buy sensors on top of that. They've got those available. This had a bunch of links online, which is basically turning a Pico into a little computer. This carrier board gives you VGA and USB, so you can plug in a keyboard and plug in a monitor, and it presents you with the MicroPython Rebel. So it's kind of a nice little, kind of a throwback to a retro era computing. Heaps of articles about this thing. AutoFTP is a library which works on both the MicroPython side as well as the PC side, and allows you to run the AutoFTP application on a computer and say, hey, synchronize this directory with MicroPython device. So you can just save your files locally, it'll detect the changes and then upload them over FTP. So it's an alternative that we've got to getting files onto the device. OpenMV, most of you will be familiar with. It's the port of OpenCV to MicroPython. You give you a whole bunch of image processing libraries that are easy to use in MicroPython. There was two founders. I can't remember the other gentleman's name, but Corbina was interviewed on Hackster.io.
Ibrahim.
Sorry?
Ibrahim,
yes, Ibrahim. So Corbina was interviewed on Hackster.io. It was quite a long form interview. Some interesting stuff being talked about there, so I figured you might be interested. There's another board that's come out with one of the coolest chips that I think is floating around, which is the QuickLogic EOS S3. This is one that has a Cortex M4 core on it, as well as an FPGA. So SparkFun have released a Feather-compatible board, and it also reminded me that Brian Faith, who's one of the guys from QuickLogic, was interviewed on the Amp Hour podcast. It's a super interesting interview, talking about how Tim Ansel, if you guys know Tim, our friend Tim, friend of the show, it sort of influenced Brian into going open source. So one of the cool things about this FPGA chip is that it's got all open source tooling all the way through. So it's really interesting. This SparkFun board looks like it's very similar to the QuickLogic, the Quick Feather is what they called their board. It's just got a different set of peripherals, accelerometer, and it's got a PDM microphone and so on. Look, for $40 American, this is quite an amazing little board. Interesting that SparkFun released some of their beta boards on crowd supply, but that's where we'll find it. Seed had some really interesting stuff with LoRa this past month. So just as a recap, I remember we looked at this a month or two ago, where they've taken one of the STM modules or STM chips, which has LoRa baked into the die. So you've got like a little Cortex M4 as well as a LoRa chip on that thing. And they've wrapped that up into a module that you can just purchase standalone, that they've certified. So they're $10 for those modules. Or the new news is they've released a couple of dev kits. So small one and the big one is the easiest way to think about it. The E5 Mini and the E5 development kit. The development kit's just kind of got more plugs, so you can jam things into it more easily. I haven't ordered these yet, but they haven't arrived. But if you're interested in LoRa, these kits look fantastic value. $20, $25. So pretty nice. There was a good release on GitHub about TensorFlow Lite package for MicroPython. So it's a custom build of MicroPython with a bunch of the Tensor Lite examples that are running on it. I haven't tried this yet, but it looks kind of interesting. So someone else go try that because I've got too much to do this month. There was a publication on basically an example on how to get a Raspberry Pi and a MicroPython device talking over a WebSocket. In this case, taking an image and transferring it to the Raspberry Pi. And there's code to show you how to do that on both sides, the Python side and the MicroPython side. Cool little thing to work through. There's the Potato Pi, which, if you guys remember the Obsidian from about a year ago, it's a similar deal, ESP32, but with the Raspberry Pi header. And so the idea here is that you can use any of the hats that are designed for the Raspberry Pi. You can plug them on and use MicroPython code to interface to them. So these guys are already shown support on how to do some of the rendering to some of the displays that are available, that kind of thing. So it's pretty cute. So MicroPython we covered last month, and they got funded. They're on Crowd Supply. That's a tiny little game console. It's absolutely minuscule. But they published a really interesting article on how to create games with MicroPython. This uses the stage library from Deshipu. Quite interesting to read through, especially into games. For those of you who are working with hardware, John Newell released Pinout, which is a tool to describe or to generate SVGs for your device pinouts. So you start with an image, and then you can describe this in a textual format, what each of those pins do and where they're located, so you can generate an SVG from it, which is quite a neat way to solve that particular problem. Pico Mantelbot, it's an instance of generating a Mantelbot on a display connected to a MicroPython device. This one was pretty cool because there was a couple of knobs connected with a few buttons, and so you could draw like a rectangle over the image and zoom in on it at any place. It's only monochrome output, but really interesting video put together by the guy who put this together, so go check that out. There's a new LilyGo Twatch released. I think this is the third or fourth in that range. This one had GPS in it. So you can see the most useful thing about what they published here was that table on the right, because you can see what features each of the different devices have. Be very careful when you buy them because it's not always obvious as to which version you're getting. So if you're looking for GPS in a watch, it's $45 from AliExpress. Might take a while to come though. Microplot, so Romilly Cocking has put together a module in MicroPython to do, that's that plot there on the bottom right. He's got this working with the Raspberry Pi Pico on the Palmeroni display, but it looks like it's largely portable, so if you want to take that code and use it, it looks pretty straightforward. This was just too cute to pass up on. Someone's 3D printed an old Macintosh Plus and then put an ESP8266 inside it, and displays Bitcoin and Ethereum prices. But they did a great job with the bitmap to make it look like ye old school. Cool. And so it got a lot of attention online. This is the last one. Lucky Resistor, I don't know who that person is, but Lucky Resistor has put together a bitmap tool so you can load images and have it spray out stuff that's useful for importing straight into a frame buffer. So this is quite neat. Accepts PNG, bitmap, a whole bunch of formats. And outputs different formats as well, HLSB, VLSB, 3 or 4 different kinds. And so you can see, it's a bit hard to see, but in the corner you can sort of see the code that gets output. It's just like a byte array. You can just suck straight into a frame buffer. That is all I had, although I did have another bit of grab bag stuff if you want to quickly go through. Graphic routines for the Raspberry Pi Pico. This was published by Palmeroni. Looks like they've got together a library which renders a bunch of different things. I haven't looked at the code yet, but it looks interesting. There's a Corgi Dude board that was released. It's for Thailand for teaching machine learning because it's built around one of those the SciP M1 chips. They've got the bit of they got some hardware support for machine learning stuff in it. Looks quite interesting. I just found this on Twitter. Wow, my logic analyzer now does MicroPython. And it turns out that Seed sell this logic analyzer, and it turns out that it runs an STM32 in there. Someone's ported MicroPython to it, and now your logic analyzer can run MicroPython. There you go. There's a Nerf Turret that's fully MicroPython controlled. It's not the first one I've seen, I'm sure, over the last one. It was pretty cute. Yeah. There's been a couple of YouTube presentations on how to do gaming. Seems to be a popular theme at the moment. So this talks about how to do games in MicroPython. All these links will be published somewhere. This is a remote control using the ESP32. I didn't think that was very exciting. This one was cute though. Why doesn't it play? So Raspberry Pi Pico with a music player with some sound chips and some lights that light up depending on the frequencies of the music that are being played. So I don't know if the sound will come through here, but at least the lights will flicker about. That's cute. I mean, that's pretty cool. What do we got here? It's a bit hard to read that, isn't it? Oh, yeah, Tetris. Again, we're going to these Pico displays. This is all MicroPython. The code is available somewhere. I did see it. We probably need to work on the display drivers a little because it doesn't quite go fast enough, I think, is the problem. Anyway. I think I've covered this before, but I wasn't sure. RealPython have a, for those that don't know, RealPython is quite a popular, regular Python website. They do a lot of really well-written, well-researched articles, and they offer training courses as well. They've offered a training course for MicroPython for a little while. But I haven't sat through this, but it looks like the table of contents is kind of what I would have thought would be a logical way to teach MicroPython, so it looks really good. I don't know who this person is, but they've been working on CAN for a little while in MicroPython. So I think this is built around, I think it was an ESP32, but you can go look at it yourselves, but they've got a CAN implementation, so if CAN's of interest to you, it looks quite useful. Actually, it must have been for the Raspberry Pi Pico. So this is called CAN Pico.
It doesn't have CAN.
Yeah, good point.
Maybe it's done with PIO, that'd be awesome.
No, I'll have to check that out. Ken Tyndall's the guy who did this. The reason these things didn't all make it to the slides is because I haven't looked into them all quite enough, as you can tell. Phil Howard, who works with Palmeroni, they've been announcing they've got a bunch of MicroPython releases to support the devices on MicroPython with the Raspberry Pi Pico. So they've also included ULab recently, which is the NumPy for MicroPython library, which is quite useful. And I think this is the last one. Nick will interest you because it's Web Serial, talking about a evolution of WebUSB to work specifically with serial devices. This is from the guys who did the what's that thing called? The Pixel Badge.
Yeah.
Goes into the history about WebUSB and how it can be evolved into Web Serial. And that is all I got for you, folks.
Cool. Thank you. Thank you, mate. Very good. Always very